here waiting at the back side of the mine. Well, not inside the mine, outside the gate. And I have here one of my co-workers, Shane, also my friend. And a lot of people keep asking me about leasing trucks and stuff like that. This kid has quite a bit to say about that because he actually did one of those programs, and he's gonna answer some questions and talk about it. It's something I never got to do, something I never did because I've always worked for someone else. So I really don't have much of an opinion, but a lot of people keep asking me. So I figure who better to ask than someone who's actually done it. And this is Shane.
How's it going?
All right, what do you got to say about leasing?
Leasing, it depends on what you do. So you have just a regular lease where at the end of the lease, you basically turn your truck back into the leasing company. It usually costs a lot more money. The lease is anywhere from 3 to 4 years, depending on the year of the truck or how many miles it has. Definitely not worth it. If you're gonna go down the lease option, do a lease purchase. The payments are usually cheaper, they're spread out through a little bit more years, and you get to keep the truck at the end of the lease. In my opinion, the best way to go about being an owner-operator is, if you can, you know, don't lease with the big company. You know, find a broker, lease your own truck, do your own thing 100%. So when I was doing the lease thing, I did a regular lease purchase, or not a lease purchase, it was a regular lease, and my payments were upwards to $1,000 a week.
Man, it's expensive.
It's not including fuel, it's not including wear and tear, tires, you know, oil changes, whatever. Also, if you're gonna lease on with a big company, the best thing to do is to stay with that company as a company driver for at least a year. Get to know your dispatcher, get to know your company, get to know the routes and what they do and how they operate. That way you know you're gonna stay with that company, because it does hurt you if you lease a truck from a big company and decide you don't want to do it anymore.
So the big question is, obviously there's a weekly payment, right?
Yes.
And that was upwards of what, $1,000?
Yeah, mine was $972 a week.
$972 a week. Now, obviously you have to move freight in order to pay for that and to cover the expenses and to make money. What happens if you don't run enough miles to cover the payment?
Well, so the problem I ran into was there was actually quite a few weeks that I didn't make enough money to cover payment, fuel, and whatever else, because for what I do, because I've always done flatbed and step deck, and the problem with running those with big companies is there's never work on the weekends. So basically what happens is, if you're with a big company and you lease, you don't make enough money, you actually get a negative paycheck.
Negative paycheck?
Yes.
Like as in you owe them money?
Yes. So when I quit Prime, because of when I leased my truck, freight dropped dramatically, or at least that's what we were told. We found out some other information later on, but irrelevant. Basically the last month I was with Prime, I was running 2, maybe 3 days a week, and I was sitting the rest because my dispatcher sucked. And I ended up owing the company, after truck payment, fuel, and all my equipment, my straps, chains, binders, all that good stuff, tarps, I ended up owing the company about $4,000.
Holy moly. $4,000. So as you guys see, a lease option isn't just something that's going to get handed to you. There's a lot of variables in there that can change the fact on whether you're making money, owing money. What about fuel? Do they take fuel out of your pay?
Yes. So it's not like what you would think, where you just use your personal debit card or anything like that. My company, we had a thing with Pilot, Flying J, and Loves, and we got a pretty good discount. You know, still about $300 every time I fueled. That's not including DEF, which is anywhere from $20 to $100. And then, but yeah, what they do is, when you get your dispatch, it'll tell you what that load pays in its entirety. And then, you know, you do that load, you finish, you do another load, you finish that one, and then at the end of the week, the company, if you work for a big company, they'll go through and they'll take all that stuff out for you. And then you just basically get the remainder. But one thing you have to remember, and where I messed up, was I didn't realize as an owner operator, even though I was leased to a big company, I was technically my own company, and I royally screwed myself on taxes. As in, I never pulled out any money aside for taxes for my 1099.
Yikes.
Therefore, I owed them about $18,000.
Yikes. Another question people have is, what about maintenance on the truck? Obviously, you have to change your oils, you have to buy tires, you have unexpected expenses, all that kind of stuff. When you had to go get an oil change, let's talk about like an oil change. How does that work?
So basically, with the company that I was with, they kept, they made it relatively easy on us for that type of stuff. They would let us know, hey, your truck's getting ready to do for service. We had 2 big shops, one in Salt Lake City, one in somewhere in Missouri, can't remember where. And basically we take it in, they do the service, whatever, or they repair whatever you needed. If I needed tires, they do whatever I needed, and basically at the end of the week, they just take it out of my paycheck.
So how much does an oil change cost for you as a lease? So
with that company, it cost me around $200 for a full service.
And how many miles did you have to go before every oil change?
About 30,000.
30,000, so that's not too bad. That's, what about every 2-3 months?
Well, with Prime, because our trucks were governed extremely low, we were the guys on the road that everybody hates. So that would be about 4 months, for a flatbed. I've never done reefer, I've never done dry van, I've never done anything like that, so I don't know what type of miles those guys run, but for me it was once every 4 months.
So that's another thing. Obviously a lot of trucks are governed. If you are signing on to a lease with a company and you're governed, let's just say at 55 or 62 miles an hour, that can severely inhibit your ability to make money, because at the end of the day, it's only going to allow you to run a certain amount of miles. At what speed were you governed?
My truck was governed, if I didn't have the cruise control on and I used the pedal, I was governed at 58. If I had the cruise control, I could go up to 63.
And what's the maximum amount of miles you were ever able to run in a day?
In a day? Shoot, 500.
Holy moly. Now, my question is, was it a pay per mile or by the load?
No, so we were paid by the load. We were paid 72% of whatever the load paid the company. And the other 28% would go to the company, the dispatcher, and everybody else that worked at the company.
And on average, what would one of these loads bring in?
For me, I stayed pretty much on the West Coast, which might just hurt me a little bit, but I'd probably, anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000 the load. But that's before fuel, that's before taxes, that's before, tire. I'm known for my tires. I don't know what it is that I do to them, but I do something to them every time.
It seems to me in order to do a lease, you have to run a lot of miles and get a lot of loads delivered. My next question is, I get asked this a lot, is what's the pay schedule like? When you go pick up a load and you deliver it, how soon do you get paid?
Weekly.
So you get paid weekly on everything. So
Yep.
And do you have to have a reserve of money in your bank in order to do this, or is everything pretty much covered by the company and you reimburse them out of your money?
So you can do it that way, but it can hurt you in the long run, especially, admittedly, I was a horrible owner operator. I was a good operator, but I was not good at owning my own truck. I was not good at the number side of things. The best thing to do would be to always have money set aside, whether it's for your truck, your trailer, your personal life, your home, your kids, whatever it is, because your truck breaks down, you could be out of a truck for a week. And big companies don't just lend out trucks like, small companies like mine do.
So you can see there's a lot more to leasing a truck than signing a paper, getting out on the road. And I know the idea of having your own truck, running your own truck, sounds great, but you really have to have a good head on your shoulders. For me personally, one of the reasons I haven't gone out and bought a truck is because I don't understand how a lot of this stuff works. I feel like I would get out there and end up upside down in things and not know what the heck I'm doing. So they get these guys that are excited to get out there or whatever, and what?
Inexperience.
A lot of truck drivers that I've seen on YouTube and TikTok and all over, they almost think some of these leasing agreements and the way they go about them are almost predatory, and they prey on the inexperienced guys, because at the end of the day, the trucking company gets those loads delivered, while there are people out there struggling just to even make the payment on the lease. So for some people, they are successful. There's all kinds of different leases. There's pay per mile, there's pay by the load, there's there's all kinds of different leases out there. I just don't know too much about it. Now, do they make you pay for the trailer?
No. One thing we never had to do was pay for the trailer, which was nice. That was part of, so the 28% that the company took was their cut of us using their trailers.
So if something went wrong with the trailer, let's say you got a flat tire, or the brake cammed over, you blew an airbag, or what, who covered that?
The company did. My company did specifically. Every company does things differently.
So if you end up breaking a strap or something like that, that comes out of your pocket?
Yes. Anything to do with load securement, anything to do with the truck, it was all out of my pocket.
And do they put limitations on what you can do with the truck?
Yes.
So you're not allowed to go haul freight for someone else? Why? You're exclusively stuck with that company?
Yes.
Okay, so you can't go out and do no side work, nothing like that. That's another thing, guys. Like, if you go and lease on your own, you know, depending on, I don't know all the details of that, but you got to imagine being locked down to one single company. It severely can limit your options. Like I said, there's been plenty of people who have success at this, but there's probably a lot more people that have failed at it. I'm making this video to inform you guys as someone who's gone through it himself, been there, done that, a first-hand count experience of it. You guys don't understand, on these trucks and trailers, there is a lot of things that can go wrong. Another question is, obviously you sign a lease. Do you get to pick your truck?
So you can, for the most part, you can. So the reason I got the truck I got was because I started with the company as a company driver, so they assigned me that truck, and it happened to be a new enough truck with the very few miles on it to where I could just lease that specific truck. But for the most part, yeah, you can pick out your truck. They don't just give you one and stick you with it, whether you like it or not.
Do they provide detail records, oil samples? Do they do anything like that? Because that's a huge part of picking out a used truck.
Well, so for my company, or the company I worked for, everything was done in-house. And the only time something got fixed or repaired outside of the company was if you broke down on the side of the road. But yes, for the most part, they keep every bit of records.
Okay, so are the trucks under warranty?
Yes.
So like if your motor was to blow, something like, is there a deductible?
So there is, provided that they cannot prove that it was your negligence. So if I don't check my oil and I blow my truck up because I'm 6 gallons low on oil, then it'll come out of my pocket.
See, there's a lot of things you have to do there. There's a lot of records you have to keep. There's so much more than just signing the dang papers, going in there, getting a truck, going down the road. It is freaking crazy. This is insight on something that I never even knew. Where do you get to go? What kind of freight do you get to haul? What kind of lanes? Do you get to pick? I don't know. Let's ask. So do you get to pick where you run?
So as a lease operator, and like I said, everything I'm talking about is with the company that I was with specifically. Every company is going to be different. So the company I was with, we didn't have forced dispatch, which means they couldn't give me a load and tell me I had to do it or I wasn't getting paid. So if they gave me a load and I didn't like it, I could say no, and I would sit there until something else pops up. For the most part, that company hauled pretty much the same things. We hauled a lot of pipe, we hauled a lot of lumber. Every now and then we would haul like forklifts, little pieces of equipment, but no, for the most part we don't get to pick what we run.
But you get to pick your loads?
We get to say yes or no.
Yes or no. So you could deny a load if you don't want it and hope something better can come up. Now let's just say you get dispatched to go pick a load up and you're 300 miles away from where that has to go and you're empty. What happens?
You drive there and don't get paid.
And that's called deadheading, correct?
Yes. Now as a company driver, you get paid for those 300 miles.
So a company driver gets paid. See, that's the difference, is a company driver does not drive without getting paid. Unless you're paid by the load, but it all works out. What were the company drivers getting per mile?
So when I was doing it, flatbed, we got, I think it was 39 cents a mile with 8 cents a mile per diem.
And how did the pay compare as a company driver versus a lease driver?
I got a paycheck every week.
Were you able to make enough money to survive as a company driver?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you know, I know a lot of people who have made a lot more money as company drivers than I did. I did all right. Admittedly, when I got my CDL, I jumped into driving, you know, just as everyone else does. And I thought I was Mr. Billy Badass. And what I would do is I would run my clocks out every single day. And by the end of the week, you know, I was just mentally drained. So I would have to take a couple days off just to kind of reboot my own head, even if I didn't have to. So, you know, it's tough for me to say because, like I said, I ran myself to death until I just couldn't drive anymore. And then, you know, I lose out on a couple days of pay, or, you know, I'd run, you know, all the way to Friday night, unload. Like I said, you know, for the most part, flatbed and step deck, they don't load on weekends.
There you have it right there. I've been saying this a lot. You heard it from him, someone who's done it. You can only run so hard, so long before it drags you down. And while we're talking about money, we had brushed on the subject of taxes. Who is responsible for doing your taxes? Were you 1099, or how did they do that?
So if as a lease operator, a lease purchase operator, an owner operator, anything like that, to where you are technically your own entity, even if you're with the big company, you fill out every year what's called a 1099. If you're smart, you'll do your taxes every quarterly because it's cheaper that way, and it's less headache. So if you do your taxes every quarter, you save all your receipts. Like I said, whether it's fuel, you know, you break something on your truck, you have to pay for it, you know, or basically anything that's an essential item for being on the road. If you save all your receipts, you do your taxes every quarter, it is cheaper, it's easier, and it's way less of a headache than doing it at the end of the year like most people do.
So we heard that he has to pay for his own straps, tarps, everything like that. Is there a minimum requirement of what they actually make you buy?
So with my company specifically, even, and this is where Prime kind of loses a lot of people. And like I said, I'm only throwing their name out there because that's who I know. I've only driven for 2 companies, Prime and the one I'm with now. And basically, even as a company driver, they require you to pay for your own equipment.
Did they actually train you to get your CDL?
No, Prime did not. Prime did not train me to get my CDL. I went to a school, paid, I think like $9,000 to get my CDL. But big companies like Prime, Knight Transportation, Swift, Werner, all them guys, you know, they do get you your CDLs.
So I know you took your test in an automatic truck, so you have the automatic restriction. What do you have to say about that? And the reason I'm asking this is because he works here with us where we have a mix of automatics and manuals, and I think he might have something and some good advice on this that you guys need to listen to.
My best advice, if you go to school, whether it's a school or a big company, get your CDL, do not train and do not test in an automatic. Anybody can hop in a truck and push a button or turn a knob and put it in drive. Not everybody can drive a manual. That's where I messed up. I didn't know that if I took my test to get my license, if I took my test in an automatic, that was legally all I'm allowed to drive, and it has more than set me back, especially with this current job.
Do you feel like you would be in a different position right now if you had got your driving test done on a manual?
I feel like I would be a lot more advanced with this company because I probably wouldn't even never went into an automatic.
So with having that automatic restriction, what has the process been like for you? Like, what's the fight been like to get that off?
So initially the fight is to find a company that has automatics that I can initially start with, which I got very lucky with this company. They happen to have 2 of them. So basically what I had to do is, like I said, find a company that would hire me with this restriction. Next step was to get my permit. I had to redo my permit test to get another CDL permit, and you have to basically drive with a licensed driver that can teach you and show you for a minimum of 14 days, 14 work days, weekends don't count. And then once you do those 14 days, you feel you're good enough to pass the test. You just go down the DMV with the truck and trailer and do the drive test. Now, I've heard a couple different schools tell me that you have to redo every single test that you would have to initially get your CDL, but that's not always true. So depending on where you live, you might want to call more than just the first person that pops up on Google.
So obviously driving an automatic, you don't have to shift. How has it been for you personally driving a manual versus an automatic? What struggles, like what are some of the things you deal with in that aspect?
So for our company specifically, you know, everybody drives a truck differently. Some people use the clutch every now and then. Some people don't ever use it unless they're stopping or going. So the clutch is wear differently. The transmission shifts differently depending on who drove it the most and things like that. You know, and when you have more than one person trying to train you how to do it, you're getting a lot of different type of information. So what you have to do is just find what works for you. Take a little bit from this person, take a little bit from that person, and just figure it out. You know, whatever works best for you.
So there you have it. There's a lot of information on this. I hope you guys listen to this. Just be careful on what you do. Know what you're getting into. Know who you're working for. Know your dispatches. Know your loads. Know all the little tiny details in the fine print that nobody reads. Talk to other drivers. Watch videos. Do what you got to do. But you have to be well informed before you do something like this. And like I said, not everybody has a bad experience. Not everyone has a good experience. Some people have a mediocre, just blah experience. It just depends on the situations. And it's gonna be up to you to figure that out. If you're gonna get your license, get a manual. I know you guys say, well, everything's going automatic, but right now there's a ton of manual trucks and you don't wanna have that restrictions. And if you're thinking about doing a lease, really pay attention. Think about what he said on this, because this is real world experience. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm sure a lot of you guys want to know, how much does a lease cost and how many years does it take, and what happens to the truck when you pay it off?
So that's where you get into, you know, being just a lease operator or a lease purchase operator. So I was just a regular lease operator, which means the truck I had, my lease was 4 years long. For the first however long, I think it was 2 years, my payment was $972 a month. Then it dropped like $50 for like a year or so. And then the last little bit, it dropped a little bit more. I didn't end up finishing out the lease because I was just a horrible lease operator. I was horrible at it. I didn't know how to fuel properly, which sounds weird. You know, you gotta watch fuel prices. I just fueled whatever. I ran my truck completely empty all the time. But as far as how much the lease cost, you know, it just depends on the year of the truck, you know, how nice the truck is. There's so many different options for trucks nowadays. But if you're a lease operator, you don't get to keep your truck. You turn it back into the lease company, and then someone else leases it and they end up keeping it, and you paid it down for them, so it's cheaper for them. If you become a lease operator, you know, you figure out what truck you want, how new, how old, it doesn't matter, as long as it runs. And you pay for that truck till it's paid off, and next thing you know, you get the title and you do as you please.